Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we try and find you fascinating people to describe and discuss the world of people analytics and HR data and technology. Today we have with us one of my best friends and one of my work family, Jan Johnson. Hey, Jan, how are you?
Hey, David, I'm great. How are you?
Good. It felt weird saying Jan Johnson because I know you as Jan Brockway, and a lot of people do who've worked with you in the past. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I also want to introduce my friend, Dwight Brown from Salary.com. Hey, Dwight.
Hey, David.
So for those of you who don't know Jan's been in the technology world for a long time, but the reason why she's in the technology world is because we recruited her away from Sun Microsystems eons ago, where she was in the world of HR doing talent management, performance management. You were kind of like the guru of performance management at Sun, right, Jan?
Yes, I was. I really owned the technology and business process for performance, career development, succession, and really loved all things HR. And at that time, we were talking about integrated talent management.
Yep.
And to show how old we are, if you did a search then, it did not come up about HR.
No, in fact, performance management back then was all about corporate performance management, right?
Right, absolutely.
So now you're at the Ultimate Kronos Group, correct?
I am, and I lead product management for recruiting, onboarding, and our core.
That's outstanding. For those of you who don't know Jan, you have missed on a wonderful, brilliant thought leader. Jan and I have known each other for years. We worked together at Workscape, which became ADP. And she's an all-around fun person. She loves her grandkids. But what's the one fun thing about you that no one knows?
Well, it's always something that no one knows when you've been in the industry as long as I have. But what many people may not know is that my best stress reliever on a Friday night or a Saturday after a long week of work is getting on our ATV or UTV and to ride through and just like challenge yourself of how much spray you can spray by hitting those mud puddles at the right speed.
That's really funny because my fun thing to do for a stress reliever is be on my Apple TV. But I'm bummed.
Yeah, I love to get out and just ride on the four-wheelers and just get completely muddy.
Yeah, well, that's now we know you're dirty. You're a dirty person.
At times.
Yes. Well, we all like to roll in the mud. I like to roll on ice because I'm a goalie. But there you go. So our topic for today is people, their work, and their data. Can you spend a minute talking about what you mean by that?
Yes. So today, everybody's talking about, there's, all kinds of things around people, whether it be talking about the great resignation or the great attrition, or how do you keep engagement, the difference of the millennial generation from our generation. And what they're doing is really changing than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. And then how do you measure all of that with the data? And not just to HR measures, but to business measures of, are we impacting the business by the work that's being performed by the people doing that performing?
So Jan, what is different between now and the past? So what's the big deal? We've always had generations come and go in the workplace. Why is now any different?
Hey, this is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Practitioner Corner podcast. It's a wonderful podcast about the journey, the path of how practitioners, both HR and TA, kind of go from high school, college, all the way to where they are right now. Some of the things that they've learned, how they've been successful, people that thrive around them, etc. It's a fun podcast. You'll love it. You'll learn from it. Subscribe to it. Thanks.
Yeah. So the first thing I think of is that when you and I first met, we were still the new people in the HR industry.
That tells you how long ago it was that we met, by the way, Jan.
Yeah. And now, we're the ones nearing retirement. And while we've always had generations in the workforce, probably the differences between the generations are more stark today than they were then. And the number of people, if you think about, we're not baby boomers, but we're a group after the baby boomers, which were the largest workforce that, we'd ever seen. And now the millennial and the Gen X, Gen Y are smaller generations, and they've grown up around technology. So their expectations in work, and we have to help managers and organizations understand those differences and meet those differences.
And so I think I understand what you're saying. So, I look at my kids, they all grew up with, some kind of technology, whether it was iPods, iPads, iPod minis, iPod shuffles, iPod whatever. They've had iPhones since they were 10 or 11 or 12. So, in fact, I think the story is when my first kid was born, they weren't around. But my second kid, after he was born, I was literally online at an Apple store waiting to pick up the first iPhone. So there you go.
Thinking about that and applying that to kind of today in the recruiting world, we have people that don't even have email addresses.
Yeah.
They don't use email at all. And my sons use email primarily to get, the notifications or the confirmations when they order something online.
Right.
But that's all they use email for, right? So when you think about applying that to the recruiting world, and it changes from, we used to do everything based on email, and now you have to rethink that paradigm.
And, at some point we went to QR codes when we were recruiting. You would walk into a store, there was a QR code there instead of getting the email the URL or the email address to send your resume to. Has that changed at all? Is that still what you think is kind of the fashion today?
So QR codes aren't as much the fashion today. It's more of, let me text you a link or
right.
Text to apply, right? And I think about it and say, who the heck is I for a job through a text? But if you think about, that 16-year-old that wants his first job or her first job, and they don't have work history, his name, contact information, and maybe a reference or two. There really isn't anything to not be truthful about.
Right.
So those things like text to apply are really now table stakes.
Well, and look at the recent year and a half with COVID and what impact that is going to have. I mean, we're in this zone where the employers are having difficulty getting applicants, and so they want to use those technologies to make it as easy as possible for everybody. And I think year over
right.
year we're going to see some exponential change in terms of the ease of application and the technologies that we use around that.
Dwight, I think that's a great point. And when you think about data and companies not being able to find enough applicants, how many people are there in the world? Something like 8 billion, right? And
right. 330
million in the U.S. So is the problem that we can't find applicants, or we're not looking in the right place, or we're not in a broad enough spectrum, right? So now HR is really around equity, inclusive, belonging, because the generation coming into work is smaller, and you've got to open your spectrum wider to be able to find those people, and you've got to make your company so those people see people like them in your own company.
Right.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
So let me transition then to question 2, which is, how does all of this impact HR tech? How does HR tech change to meet the need?
Yeah. So when I first started in HR technology, it was really around moving the forms to the computer. And David, you'll remember us talking about paving the cow path, right? We called it paving the cow path. And you look today and you wonder how much of that has really evolved. We had that focus on employee and manager self-service. And as a product manager, I wanted to build the HR system that everyone couldn't wait to use. And I'm still waiting for that day.
Yeah.
Right? Because people want to use HR technology to get their paychecks, to look for a new job when I'm upset at my boss or I'm frustrated with my work.
Right.
And so now is really, how do I bring it into the technology that people use every day?
Yeah. And if you think about the difference between consumer technologies and the HR technologies are really kind of stuck in that mud of that personnel action form, right? And I have to capture all those things, some of which is compliance based. Okay. And so we have to, but some of which are just choices. I mean, we're making choices to stay in the 50s and 60s rather than upgrading to the 2020s and beyond.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one of the analogies I use with my team is I'm reading the news and see something I wanted to share on LinkedIn. How easy is it to do that?
Oh, yeah.
It's really easy, right? So let's contrast that to HR technology, whether it's getting an attaboy in my email for a project I just finished, or, the project management we're doing over a project through Teams. How easy is it to bring that into my performance management development, right? And I've picked up skills through doing work and working with other people that aren't reflected on my profile because it's not easy to do. How do we bring that consumer type pieces into the HR technology and really drive value for the employee and manager conversation? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's not as much about documenting it for legal reasons as it is driving the conversation for both business success as well as individual and people's success.
If we think about the world of work, it used to be you got hired for a purpose. You did that purpose and only that purpose. You really didn't vary things because that was someone else's job to do. And then, you went home. Today, because of layoffs and because of the amalgam of things and technology that we have to do, there really is no beginning and end to what someone does. It's only their own, I guess, limitations or skill sets. So the job description, performance evaluation, the things you're talking about, they are artifacts of an old time that has not modernized. And therefore, when we start thinking about how do you measure success in an organization? How do you measure personal success? It's so hard to do because people's work isn't that easily categorized anymore.
It's really true. And at work, I'm a member of our US employee resource group. And over Veterans Week, we had a great webcast with leaders in the organization. And one of the questions we got was, how do you make that transition from knowing clearly what gets you promoted in the military to the promotion criteria in corporate America? Right. And there are similarities and there are differences, but that's one of the differences you're talking about, David, that it makes me think about is, in the military, there's so many slots. I had to have a certain test score. I had to have a certain evaluation score. Right. It was black and white.
Yeah.
And in corporate America, we always say you have to have built the skills, but there has to be a business need. Right. Well, what's that business need? How many senior product managers do I need versus just product managers?
Right.
And, it's just much more gray than it used to be, the same as our job descriptions.
And we hold ourselves to a standard and we have to, right? Who are we promoting? Why are we promoting them? What are we promoting them to? There needs to be a lens on those things because you don't want to promote the wrong people and you want to promote and highlight and celebrate the right things. But unfortunately, we know that in the world of DEI and B, that there are certain people who aren't getting promoted as much as others. And so how do you change that?
That's a lot of where I'm focusing right now is how do we start to highlight the hidden bias and, and then the challenge is how do you do that in the places where they work? Right? You can't do that just in an HR system that they use once a month or every 2 weeks. You have to help raise those awarenesses where they actually work. So, and frankly, that's part of what keeps me going is looking at how do we make those transitions and challenges. And I think it will be a journey. At days, I'm disappointed that we haven't made more progress than we've made. I think the next couple of years, we're going to see tremendous progress in that area.
So at the beginning, we talked about when we met and how young we were. And I can't believe it, but we were pretty young. And now that we're reaching retirement and you look back on everything, what's the most surprising or shocking thing that you can think about looking back?
Yeah, I mean, in looking back, I look at how I've changed. A lot of it has been that my leadership has really changed. And what matters most to me is enabling the organization to grow, sharing my experiences and my learning, and really coaching the younger generation. It's really fun to have those conversations with my kids, as well as some of my employees who are the same age as my kids, and really help them think about their behaviors, where they really want to go in their career, and is about moving up or doing different work and what motivates them. And that's what I encourage people to think about, is not just the paycheck is very important, and the paycheck comes with levels and promotions and all of those things, but it doesn't matter if you don't love what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And so when I talk to my boss, she knows with me, it's all about doing something fun and challenging now. It's not about getting that next promotion. How can I grow and how can I help others grow?
I've been having that same conversation. I have 2 college-age kids, and, they're both in that stage of trying to figure out what they're going to major in and, thinking about their career paths and everything. And, number one, being where I am, it seems like the years have passed so quickly that
it does.
I still question whether or not I'm qualified to give them advice on that, because I'm young at heart. I still feel like I'm 22, even if my face doesn't show it. But, the other thing is exactly like you talked about, having been through these various experiences in the work world and in life, and being able to mentor them and, talk with their friends and whatnot, and just say, look, guys, do what you love. Because if you're in a job where you're miserable, it's not going to matter how much you make. It's not going to matter the prestige. And then the other piece is the technology. And I remember one of my first jobs out of college, we had email, but it was on the old mainframe. And, moving to Microsoft Outlook felt like a monumental change. And it was. Sure. It was. Yeah. So it's always nice. It is nice to be able to look back and have some experience and some wisdom to be able to offer, and also push them on the technology and push them to be sure that they're keeping up with the technology.
And we're talking to someone who's building the technology for the next generation. And Jan, I think one of the things that you have talked about a lot is engagement of not just employees, but of candidates, and making sure that the right people are being captured, or at least their information is being captured. Because even if there isn't a job available now that fits their skills or fits their particular wants and needs, that you create a community and you create that belonging, so that when something does come up, you capture that and you reach out to them.
Yeah, that's really one of the most important things in recruiting today is the ability to be able to build rapport and a sense of belonging with the candidates and really help them understand the culture and what it is to work there. Because it was for you and I and Dwight when we entered the workforce. For the generations today, it's really about feeling that connectedness. And that's harder in a kind of remote environment, but you definitely have to build that, the candidates, and then deliver on that when they become employees.
You know, when we reached out for my first job, it was from a listing in the New York Times. And, you know, had I not gotten that job, because I actually got that job 2 weeks out of college, but had I not gotten that job, I'm pretty sure I'd have to keep searching through the New York Times. They're not going to hold on to my resume and go, this David Turetsky fellow looks pretty good. We've got to capture his data. Whereas today, with the technologies that we have, you know, you can keep those profiles alive. And, you know, you talk about belonging. You can keep pinging them and saying, hey, follow us on this and follow us on these social media sites like Instagram, Pinterest, Reddit. I'm showing my age talking about those, not like TikTok or whatever. But you know, this next generation of employee engagement is more about finding them where they are and connecting with them on where they are, right?
Absolutely. And candidates and employees, that you have to meet them where they are,
right?
Connect with them where they are. And, you know, I think when I was applying for my first jobs, it was all about selling myself. And now it's as much about selling the organization as it is the candidate selling themselves.
Right. And now this whole thing about UX or EX, actually, employee experience, as a new paradigm in developing not only HR platforms, but also HR communication strategies, candidate communication strategies, all of that. That's something new. That this is not something that was around 30 years ago. This is a much more modern approach, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even take that a bit further, that because belonging is so important, that it really has to be about team experience, sure. Employee experience, that, you know, you have to think about how the team is engaged, and that team could change definitions every day.
Sure.
Right. Because it could be the team. And I had this discussion with our chief diversity officer, that there's days I feel very connected to my teams, the people that work on my team, the team I work on. But there's days I don't feel overly connected to UKG as a whole. Right. So, and that's okay. But I have to feel connected somewhere, or I'm going to disengage and start looking elsewhere.
Right. And one of the things we started talking about at the beginning of the show was how do you measure those things? How do you keep your manager or HR or someone in the loop that says, hey, Jan's a very valuable resource creating our next generation products. How do we make sure she's engaged? How do we make sure she's taken care of? Are we talking her language? Or are the right people reaching out to her? Not just her boss, but her peers, her colleagues, her mentor. How do we do that? How do we measure that?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the evolving areas of technology today. And we're also used to those beautiful engagement surveys that we take once or twice a year,
right.
And then come up with an action plan that we never execute, right? So how do you actually make that in the moment? And the term we're using now is pulse surveys. So if I think about it, of an employee comes in to clock in for the day, and asking them, and I love the concept of a stay survey, right? That you ask them some questions from the stay survey, like, how are you feeling today? Are you excited to be here? What's the one thing that could make your work life better? So instead of waiting for those 1 or 2 times a year, how do we capture that data, analyze it in real time, and provide actionable actions, that's redundant, actionable work to the managers? Because I go back to years ago, I said, nobody goes to school to be a manager.
Yeah.
Right? We learn it as we go. And, there's psychology and all kinds of things you can take. But for the most part, our managers are people that were operationally really good, and we promote them to managers. So we need to give them easy to consume actions they can take, whether it would be, Dwight asked for some time off days before he needs it, and he's really on the cusp of using all of his time off. And so giving you a recommendation of, hey, David, you do a one-on-one with Dwight, and here's some conversation starters to ask.
And how about that frustration that a manager feels when they have no idea where the accrual, where the accumulators are to see how many days does he have left? Why do I have to go and search for that stuff? It should be at my finger. I should know where that is. I shouldn't have to be sent to get an MBA on how to manage people from, or take a class at least, because that should be at the ready. And all those tools should be at a manager's disposal so that we know where we can go to find it.
And what are the current trends, right? Could there be a highlight that this person has something going on in their life that they haven't shared with you yet, but the organization could help them? And again, back to the point of how do you bring that to them where they're working and not make them go and seek it out?
And that's the difference between modern UX and modern EX around HR. It has to be insightful. It has to give you information before you ask for it and provide it to you in a way that you don't have to search for it. You don't have to call the people in payroll or HR to find it out because they've got to get on with other things. And so until that actually happens, we are going to, HR is always going to look like that, that record keeper. And we got to get out of that business. Absolutely.
And I would just add on, you have to be able to surface that to them where they are when they need it, whether that be in Slack, in Teams, in their scheduling system, in their finance system, wherever it is that they spend the majority of their time.
Which is usually email.
You have to surface it to them there.
Email, their chat bots or whatever. So Jen, today what we've tried to do is talk about how work is happening across the generations, what's different about it today, and how is the technology enabling, disabling, or making it challenging for employees and managers to work together. Is there anything else you want to add before we close?
I think the only thing I would add is that, you and I both know it's really an evolving journey, and the business has to keep pushing us to make that progress. And I look forward to the day where we're having these discussions really with HR people, but with the operational people and the business people. And they're asking us and pushing us to drive it forward because they see the value. And that's really when we've kind of made it and I can retire.
So you're not going to retire until 2040 or 2050 now? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe that's too high a bar.
It's a very high bar, Jan. Very high bar. I'm not going to retire till then because I have a 9-year-old child, but that's a different story. Jan, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. And we hope we can have you back on another episode of the HR Data Labs.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun. I always love talking about HR technology and how we continue to drive the world forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And Dwight, thank you.
Thanks for having me as always. And Jan, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
And thank you very much for listening. We appreciate you being here. If you like the episode, please hit follow and maybe suggest that others in your circle might like it as well and send it over to them. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Take care and please stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.